Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's rewatch, review, and reaction for the Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 4, Part 1. That's a mouthful. Anyway, so I am continuing off of videos that I started 4 years ago where I reviewed the first 3 phases of the MCU. And what I would do is, if you haven't seen the video, you should check them out. They're pretty good. What I would do is I would talk about, hey, there's this movie I'm about to watch, and I'd talk about what I remember about it from seeing it a while ago, and then I'd go watch it and stop the recording, and then come back after I watched it and be like, okay, I just watched the movie, and here's my thoughts about it now. I thought that was a pretty fun thing. So if I don't do the reactions full on, like film myself as I'm watching it, so you can see me go, and like fake reactions to it, I don't do that. I just cut from what I think about it before I see it, then I go watch it, then I'll come back and you get my direct reaction after watching it, not during. So, anyway, as I said, I covered the first 3 phases of the MCU, so now I'm back after 4 years to cover Phase 4. So how this is going to work is I'm not going to do Phase 4 all in one video because that would be way too freaking long. So I split Phase 4 up into 2 videos. I split it in half. So with Phase 4, I will be covering the Marvel, the Disney Plus shows. However, I'm not going to watch the entire show. I do not have that much time on my hands, or that time to waste. So when I go off to watch the Disney Plus show, just like it has when I go to watch the movie, instead of watching the entire show, I'm just going to watch the last 2 episodes, because the last 2 episodes pretty much equal a movie. Probably a little less, especially in the case of these half-hour shows like She-Hulk or What If, it's going to be less. But I thought maybe should I watch 4 episodes, but no, I'm not going to do that. I want to stick to the format, no matter how long the episodes are, of watching 2 episodes. So the final 2 episodes, because I think that's what really where the show hits most of the time. There are other examples where the first episodes are actually the best, but no, I'm going to be consistent because that's really like the closing of the show. So I'm going to watch the final 2 episodes of each of the Disney Plus shows. The movie, I will watch the movie in its entirety as I've done before, and so I'll use that format. I'll talk about it, come back, and do it. So I am going to cover Disney Plus shows, but I'm not going to cover some of these specials and shorts, such as Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special, the something werewolf, whatever that werewolf thing, I'm blanking on what it was called. Werewolf by Night, that's it. And the I Am Groot shorts, which I didn't even know existed for a long time. So yeah, even though technically what I looked up said those things were part of Phase 4, I don't really consider them part of Phase 4. And if you have a problem with that, then, well, what can I tell you? It's my video, and this is how I'm doing it. I've seen some lists of Marvel Phase 4 that leave out the Disney Plus shows. I don't agree with that. I think they're too vital to the MCU now. I mean, it's totally different, not at all the same thing from those, ABC shows or the Netflix Marvel shows. Those were totally different things. Those absolutely were not part of the MCU, but these Disney Plus shows absolutely are part of the MCU, so that's different. So I think you can say you watched Phase 4 without watching these Disney Plus shows. So how I'm going to split this is, let's bring up the list. So this video I am going to go in order of release date, not in the order that they were intended to be released, because, as we all know, our friend, the good old global pandemic, messed up the release date, and all the Disney Plus shows had to come first when the original plan was Black Widow would come first, and all the movies had to be pushed back a year or two. But I am not taking that into account because I'm not going to give the what if scenario, the what could have been or what could have happened. I'm going by how it actually was released, because they tried to change the scripts around a bit to fit with what was coming first. So anyway, I'm going to start with WandaVision. That was the first thing released for Phase 4. And then Falcon and Winter Soldier, then Loki, Season 1. And then Black Widow, then What If, then Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, then Eternals, and then Hawkeye. And that's what I will be covered in Part 1 of Phase 4. Then next month I'll be back here for Part 2 of Phase 4, in which I will cover Spider-Man No Way Home, Moon Knight, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Miss Marvel, Thor, Love and Thunder, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. So that's what I'll be doing. So for this video, I'll be getting into Phase 4. Now, I just wanted to start off by saying, it's generally believed that Phase 4 was lesser than all the previous phases. That a lot of people complain, and they're complaining even more during Phase 5, but that's another story. That Marvel's lost its touch, that after Endgame, it kind of, why is it still going? It kind of told the story. It's just, and people are having superhero fatigue, and all those entries are worse. And I have a hot take on that. I totally disagree with all of that. I think that Phase 4 was no better or no worse than most of the previous phases, to a small degree. I mean, Phase 3 was slightly better, if I'm being fair, but not by much. And I think this way not because I have such a high opinion of Phase 4, but because I have a lower opinion of the first 3 phases than most people do, especially Phase 1. As I said, I wasn't a huge fan of it, still not that huge of a fan of it. Phase 2, it was hit and miss, and Phase 3 was also hit and miss, and so was Phase 4. I think there are some great things in Phase 4 that are just as great as the great things in previous phases. You have WandaVision, you got Loki Season 1, you got What If, you got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and Black Panther was pretty good as well. So I think, and then you got some misses in Phase 4 as well, such as Falcon, Winter Soldier, Black Widow, Eternals, and Thor, Love and Thunder. But I mean, it was that way with the other phases too. And Phase 2 had the Avengers Age of Ultron, which was an okay movie. And it had was that second one, that Thor movie, the whatever that was Dark World, that was a miss. and Phase 3 had a few misses in there as well. I don't have the list in front of me, that's why I'm blanking on them. But I know, I went through these. There are definitely misses in these ones. And Captain America Civil War was one of them, even though most people are wrong about that and actually are under the ridiculous impression that it was actually a good movie, which it wasn't. It was a terrible movie. Anyway, but there are also other misses that are more widely agreed upon, shall I say, in earlier phases, and I think that Phase 4 is no different. There's some strengths, some misses, and that's how every phase has been. In fact, if anything, I might like it better in Phase 1, which I thought was a bit bland. So there. Anyway, I'm sorry, it's true. So I just disagree with this general thing of, Phase 4 really dropped the ball. It was so worse, and there was too much, and it was superhero fatigue, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it seems like Phase 3 had just as many things. Although the Disney Plus shows are bigger and longer, and so I get that superhero fatigue thing. But, I don't know. I never really got that. But anyway, let me go ahead and get started. And I'll start with the first entry on my list, which is WandaVision. Now, WandaVision, as I just talked about, was superhero fatigue. It was in a weird place because of the global pandemic. We were supposed to get Black Widow a lot earlier than what we did. And yeah, it was supposed to come out in, I believe, May of 2020. And that never happened. And so 2020, we were I think it was a complete vacuum of movies. And it wasn't until, I believe, January of 2021, that WandaVision came out. So we had been without any MCU official releases since 2019. I believe it was the Spider-Man, what was it called? It was a home thing. It wasn't No Way Home. It was Far From Home. That's it. Yeah, so we hadn't had any. So it was. I remember like people being so excited by seeing the Marvel logo at the start of WandaVision. Like, oh my God, this is back! It's finally back! It's been so long. Oh, Marvel, you're back! Which is a funny contrast to right now, where people are like, oh, another fucking Marvel project. Jesus Christ, I'm so sick of these. There's so many of them. They just won't stop coming. So it's a weird contrast. Now, mind you, again, this is the Disney Plus show, so I'm only going to watch the last 2 episodes and not the entire thing. I have seen the entire thing twice, though, to be fair, because this is one of my favorite, from memory, this is one of my favorite Marvel entries, like movies, shows, whatever. This is one of my favorite Marvel entries in the MCU, period. It was one of my favorite shows from... Yeah, I remember when I did my top 10 favorite shows of the year, this was like my number 2 or number 3. I think it was number 2, actually. It was up there. I really, really liked this one. I actually liked it better than Loki Season 1. Now, Loki Season 2, maybe not, but that's this Phase 5 thing, so I won't get to that for a very long time. But I remember, because it started out like... I gotta say, doing the half-hour episodes was very brutal, and having to wait a week because the mysteries were so intriguing. But that's what made it so good. It was like, this silly sitcom, but then all of a sudden they'd introduce like the guy in the beekeeper suit out of nowhere, and weird shit that was implying like, what is going on? I loved the format. It was like so good. And really worked, and it brought back Darcy from Thor, and the FBI guy from Ant-Man. So it was intriguing. It set up really good mysteries. Now, it did set up other mysteries that it kind of fell flat, which is what I'll see in the finale. The whole boner thing was a gigantic. What a huge way to fuck with your audience, introduce the actor who played Quicksilver in the Fox Universe X-Men film, but then it mean nothing. But then, of course, now we're finally getting some X-Men cameos 4 years later. They just weren't ready for it yet. But what pissed me off even more was the whole, I have a friend who's this astrophysicist, and who's it going to be? Is it going to be Reed Richards? Is it going to be, who's it going to be? Someone special? No, it's just some random person. Don't fuck with us like that. Come on. That's just not nice. But other than that, some of the mysteries were really intriguing and did pay off. But what I remember most about this show, and what I love is what I'll get into when I watch the penultimate episode, is the tragic story of Wanda and how it gets into the trauma that she's experienced. I think that's why I love the show so much, because I found that aspect really emotional, impactful. It really spoke to me, emotionally, really affected me. I think it was absolutely amazing character stories, but then I'm also going to watch the finale, which a lot of people cite as a huge disappointment, and that it brings it down for them. And I do remember that, yes, they did a couple of the big Marvel Skybeam type epic battles that Marvel always has to do, and that was kind of a disappointment. That's how they decided to end this very, intriguing, intellectual, mysterious, emotional, character story. They decided to end it with the huge Marvel battles. So yeah, that was a bit disappointing, but on the other hand, I've heard a lot of people criticize the fact that Wanda was evil by trapping all these people in the thing, and what's her face, Monica Rambeau, was just like, oh, they'll never know what you sacrificed, and they kind of dismissed that. I remember the pitch meeting guy was like, oh yeah, she had to give up her imaginary friend. It's not her imaginary friend, it's her fucking husband. And now granted, it wasn't actually him as a recreation, but still, it was real to her, and their kids were real to her. So I think people are kind of callous who say stuff like that. I think she did give up a lot. Now, true, she did torture those people, and that wasn't a good thing, but she gave up a fucking lot. And she's been through a lot. Like, all the trauma she's been, I mean, that's what the whole show is about. Like, how could you miss that? Anyway, so I'm going to go watch that now, the last 2 episodes of that, and I'll be back to give my thoughts on after just watching. So I'll see you then. Alright, so just came back from watching the last 2 episodes of WandaVision, and I do miss out on all the sitcom shenanigans by only watching the last 2 episodes, so I do have to sort of rely on my memory. And it seems like the third to last episode was very important as well. I mean, maybe I should have watched that, but I'm sticking to my format for last 2 episodes. Not going to make any exceptions. But yeah, no, I think these last 2 episodes are good to give you the feeling of what the show is really, really about. Which is the trauma that Wanda experienced, and particularly the second to last episode really gets into she's had a really rough life, and the scene when she was a child watching sitcoms with her family, and then a missile just out of nowhere coming into her apartment and killing her parents, that was brutal, and how she and her brother were stuck there for 2 days, thinking that the missile would go off. Now, I do believe, and it's been a while since I've seen these MCU movies, but I do believe she told the story of how her and her brother were stuck watching the missile that never went off. Probably in Age of Ultron, I think. But yeah, I think it was definitely before this, and now we get to see it on screen. And then we see her, with Hydra, which was, set up for an Age of Ultron as well. I kind of forgot before I saw this episode while I was watching the show, I kind of forgot that she used to be a villain and used to work for Hydra. But it was interesting getting her backstory. But, of course, they're retconning it a little bit, which I actually don't mind. I mean, it's Marvel. I'm a lot more looser with Marvel. But because they're saying, or at least Agatha is saying that she was always a witch and she always had these, powers. That's how she was able to stop the missile from going off by using her powers, which is not really what they implied. They kind of implied originally that the missile was just defective, and she got her powers later on when Hydra, did experiments with the Infinity Stone and gave her powers. But now they're saying that she already had powers. It's just the Infinity Stone amplified those powers and made her even more powerful to be the Scarlet Witch. So I'm fine with that. Actually, I think that actually works. They want to, but it is a retcon. But not all retcons are bad, as I talked about before. This one works for me. But I want to talk about the ending of the finale. So, yes, there is a lot of Marvel fights, when the 2 Visions were fighting each other, in the sky, and when Agatha and Wanda were fighting each other in the sky, I just zoned out. I just totally tuned out. It's just the same old BS. that was really not interesting because it doesn't really mean anything. Like, these energy beams are shooting out of Wanda and shooting into Agatha, and then like she pours all the red energy into Agatha and then takes the red energy out. Like, this is all like nonsense to me. Like, I don't really follow it and I don't really care. But the thing is that there are a lot of good character stories woven in between those fight scenes that still make the finale worthwhile, still make it worth watching, and the whole ship of Theseus argument to the two visions. I think that was a very sort of inventive way to resolve this, battle between, and it's two. The hero and a villain both with the same powers. Again, that's another cliche that the MCU has done over and over again. But what I found interesting is the ending when we get into Wanda's trauma that she experienced. And that's so... Back to the penultimate episode, we got the origin story. It's basically the beginning of the show, and I think this was an amazing structure for the show. How the show started with them already in the sitcom, and you're like, how they get in the sitcom? What the fuck is going on? Television was dead, but then the penultimate episode goes back and shows the events leading up to it. That explains it all, and I think it was epic. Like, it had me in tears, especially the tragic element to this backstory of her going to visit Vision's body, which was being worked on by scientists who were trying to exploit it, and her being so stricken by grief that she just inadvertently creates this alternate reality and rebuilds Vision. And it's centered around sitcoms, and of course this episode showed her how important sitcoms were to her during her life, how she used to watch them as a kid with her family, and she always in the background when she was recovering. So it makes sense that that's what she would center her fantasies around and make them like. Because you notice how they skipped over the 90s for the sitcoms, which kind of irritated me. I wanted to see a Seinfeld-esque, what's the deal? But the reason why they did that is because it had to be family-focused sitcoms. And there were no really good family-focused sitcoms in the 90s that weren't already started in the 80s, like Full House started in the 80s. Any good ones, anyway. I guess you could say Married with Children. They could have done that, but then that's not like a happy family. And I know they did Modern Family eventually, but which isn't exactly a happy family, but it's kind of really. It's not as like messed up as Married with Children is. But anyway, I can see why they skipped the 90s, or the Simpsons wouldn't work. They couldn't do a cartoon version of this. But anyway, because it was all, the point was her having a happy family, which is something she never got as a child. So it gets into her whole psychology. And that's why I love this show, and that's why I think it does an amazing job in these two episodes, despite the, Marvel-esque flying battles or whatever, was such a good payoff to that particular story. Now, getting into her torturing the townspeople, which is a very eerie scene, by the way, when Agatha started taking their hexes or their control away from them and they could actually speak as the real person. They were all freaked out. It was like, oh, my daughter is locked in the room. Can you please let her out? You can make her your child's friend. Or, the other woman saying, oh, my husband is, flying away for a trip. Tell him not to return home to this hell. Like, oh, that was very, very harrowing. And I can see why some people see Wanda as the villain, as the bad guy here for doing that. But I think a couple of things are important. First of all, they make it very clear in these two episodes that Wanda was not aware of what she was doing. She did not do this intentionally. In fact, she even brings that up with Agatha. She was saying the difference between me and you is you did this on purpose. Like, I didn't mean to do this. And it gets back to sort of the more fantasy elements that she has all these powers and she wasn't even aware of how powerful she was. and her grief and her anguish just overwhelmed her and controlled her and took, like, inadvertently, like, took over her powers and created, like, this fake reality, which is, it's like what some people do in real life. They create a different reality in their own head to try to cope with grief or anguish. But of course, her being this powerful witch was able to actually, take over a town. And I think that does make a difference. Now, you could say, and a lot of people saying, oh, she's a villain, she should have been arrested after doing this or whatnot. But I disagree. I think she's a victim. And, yes, all those other people who lived in town were victims too, yes. But punishing Wanda wasn't really the solution to that. Maybe ensuring it wouldn't happen again. But once she was aware of what she was doing, like, she was horrified. And she was like, yes, I will set you all free. And she went out of her way to set them free. But then by setting them free, her husband and her kids started disappearing. And so that created this moral quandary, which, Agatha was taunting her about, ha ha ha. And so I think that's what made the finale so damn interesting. And ultimately, she did decide she couldn't, if having her family back, and they were back, because some people say, oh, her imaginary friends. They're not her imaginary friends. It is it was real in a sense. And they were kind of real people, and this is what the Ship of Theseus argument got into. So it wasn't just I really take offense to that imaginary friend thing. They were real. It's real! And she was willing to sacrifice them because their existence came at the expense of the torture of the other people, and she couldn't live with that. So I think that's why ultimately she was a good person. And that line where Monica says to her, they don't understand what you sacrificed for them. I totally agree with that. I think that went over the head of a lot of people. But she literally sacrificed her family, which was so important to her, who were real. Because she couldn't stand the fact that their existence came at the expense of the torture of these other people. Now, the one thing that I have about that scene, though, is not what other people bring up. It's the fact that all the townspeople are standing there staring at her and giving her the evil eye. Especially like that woman earlier talked about, oh, how my kid is locked up in the room. Can you please let them go? It seems like as soon as that hex is removed and they can do what they want, her first reaction should be to go back and get her kids, not stand around the town center and give Wanda the evil eye. Her first reaction should be to just run back and help the kids. And all those other people actually should be afraid of Wanda because of what they just did to her and they saw how powerful she was. I don't buy that they would just stand around and give her the evil eye. I think that they would run away from her and like, holy fuck, let me get the fuck away from her and try to get as far away from the town as possible, so that she doesn't fuck with them anymore. So yeah, I don't know. that was a bit cartoonish to me. And the whole, again, the whole fight with Agatha was kind of, I thought Agatha was a more interesting character before this episode, to be honest. But her Agatha's punishment of being forced to be a fictional character, like, that's brutal, and I think she totally deserves it. Totally deserves it. But then again, there's that show Agatha's going to have, which by the recording of this video hasn't come out yet. So presumably she will be released from that spell somehow. I'm sure they'll deal with it, and they won't just ignore the fact that she was turned into a sitcom character permanently. And I guess the thing with Wanda, I'll get more into her involvement with Doctor Strange when I get to Doctor Strange Multiverse in the Multiverse of Madness, because a lot of people had an issue with it because they said, oh, she had this redemptive arc at WandaVision that really truly got into her character, and all of a sudden it turned her into a villain. And the rightful response is look, at the end of this show, you see it in the post-credits scenes, if you stick around, she's reading the evil book, which has been described as an evil book that will corrupt people, and she was reading it, so it makes sense she turned evil, because she was... And I've heard other people in response to that say, oh yeah, sure, she just read an evil book and it turned her evil. I'm like, it's the fucking Marvel Cinematic Universe. What do you want? You gotta suspend disbelief a lot and just go with things. It's a freaking comic book series of movies. Come on. Yes, an evil book turned her evil. How is that harder to believe than Tony Stark having technology that's like centuries above where we are now, or them being able to travel in space, or a fucking god from the, land of Asgard, which is real. I mean, how is... I'm sorry. It's fucking comic books. Just go with it. Jesus Christ. So I had no issue with her turn of character in Multiverse of Madness, because the evil book. That's all you need to say in the Marvel. I'm sorry, it is. But as I said, I'll get into that more when I get into the Multiverse of Madness. And yeah, the other post-credit scene with Monica sort of set up for the Marvels, which finally came out, which I just saw about, and at the time when they were pointing to space, and also the ending of Far From Home, I always thought that they were like on a mission, like on a spaceship, like far in space, like helping the Skrulls or something. I didn't realize they were just in a freaking space station orbiting Earth. That's kind of a disappointment, actually. But anyway, so my rating for WandaVision out of 10, I'm going to give it a 10. The best. I think this was, despite some of the nitpicks I had, some of his flaws, it was overwhelmingly an amazing, one of the best MCU entries, I think, in the entire MCU, because it was character-based. It really delved into the psyche of Wanda and her backstory, particularly the second to last episode, which I had when I did a video when I ranked my top 20 favorite episodes of all time. That was in it, because that's a great episode. It's so emotionally charged. And the music, but the music is so damn good. But anyway, that and the finale maybe bogged down a little bit by the Marvel-esque, cliches, but it didn't. Some people will act like it ruined it, like the finale was terrible and ruined the show. Or brought it down slightly. I disagree. I think despite those Marvel cliches, which yes, I could have done without, the finale was still strong. It was still good. It still led to Wanda having to sacrifice her family in order to stop torturing people, which she wasn't aware she was doing. I think that was a powerful story and done very well. And of course, the beginning of the show, which I hadn't watched recently, but I remember from when I did watch it, was such a good mystery. It was so intriguing. It was like one of the shows I remember like being week to week being like, oh God, I gotta see the next episode. So yeah, I gotta give WandaVision a 10 out of 10. So anyway, now after that really great show, I have to move on to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I gotta be honest here, I'm forcing myself to watch for this video. I really do not want to watch this again. I kind of feel like, because when I watched this originally, I gave it a 5 out of 10. I kind of feel like that rating is gonna go down. I feel like I was being a bit generous to it, and I feel like there's just, because it did have some interesting things, commentary on racial inequality that was effective. But overall, a lot of things were just cheesy, and just didn't work. Like the whole bromance thing they were trying to go for with the Falcon and Winter Soldier kind of fell flat for me. And then, of course, the real ending is when, I guess they call it New Captain America, comes up and gives that speech about "you got to do better, Senator." It was so unrealistic. I call it one of the most unrealistic things in the MCU, where he might as well have been doing a dun 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 dun. Dun, should have been playing in the background. He should have been, "I dream of a world where you can walk into a 7-Eleven without an interpreter." That's a Naked Gun reference if you don't get that. I love the Naked Gun. Anyway, yeah, that speech and the fact that everyone's like, "Oh, you're right, I'm going to totally change my mind." Like, as if that is remotely how politics work. No, they're bought off by these corporations to do what they fucking want to do and do their bidding and come up with BS, bullshit excuses as to why to do them. And then the whole motivation of the villains made no sense. The character of, I can't even remember his name, but we'll get into that. You know, that guy who the government made Captain America, but it was really a bit of a dick, but maybe he wasn't a dick, or maybe he was kind of a dick. Like, the show was just all over the place and not done well. I can't believe that some people actually really like the show. The show is actually really popular. This isn't considered one of the worst entries in the MCU, but I think I would. But anyway, we'll see how I feel after watching the last 2 episodes of the season, which I gotta be honest, I don't even remember the penultimate episode at all. So this is going to be a bit of a refresher for me. The finale I remember as really, like, those being really bad, I'll be honest. But we'll see how I feel after watching these last 2 episodes. You've got to do better, Senator. Anyway, so just got back from watching the last 2 episodes of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and okay, it isn't quite as bad as I thought it would be. There were definitely some good parts of it. The character of, Sam, the Falcon, or who became Captain America, was a really dynamic, thought-out character, and his relationship with Bucky, well, at least in the last 2 episodes. I remember it being dumb in the earlier episodes, but in the last 2 episodes it was good, although they didn't really have that much interaction in the last 2 episodes. But, and yeah, so the penultimate episode dealt with the aftermath of, can't remember his name, John Walker, beating one of the Flag Smashers to death because his friend died. And I think the way that they handled him, like visiting his friend's parents and trying to honor him, it was kind of sad, but it was just, I don't know, it was just the whole way they handled John Walker was very confusing. It's like he's an asshole that you think is dumb, then he's actually, you can understand him, then he's doing dumb shit again, then he's doing good stuff again. It's like very confusing. And yeah, so mostly penultimate episode mostly dealt with that. It was kind of a breather in between where the Flag Smashers were sort of regrouping, and Sam was trying to figure out what to do. He was kind of, they got kicked off the case. He was just taking a rest, and he didn't have it was interesting because it started out with the fight between John Walker and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which was a good fight. It was pretty suspenseful, and then the John Walker smashed the Falcon's wings, and there was that other guy in the military who was helping him out, and he said, "Here, you can have the wings." So he's supposed to become the next Falcon, apparently. There was so many Easter eggs of them trying to build stuff. And so, and then Sam goes back to his sister's place, and it was kind of boring. The whole side plot of their boat, they're having to sell the boat and they're getting the neighborhood together to fix it, it reminded me of a lot of Marvel Netflix shows in the sense of when they were just a lot of filler and a lot of kind of boring and shit that you don't really need. And that's what it reminded me of. The storyline didn't go anywhere. They never actually resolved what happened to, the foreclosure or whatever problem his sister was facing. I don't know, maybe he got more money from being the new Captain America. I don't know, and yeah, and then I forgot Zemo was involved. Like, thankfully he barely turned up in these last two episodes. They just had Bucky got called Wakanda on him and got him arrested again, but apparently he killed some of the Flag Smashers at the end from prison. It was supposed to be he moment. I hate Zemo. Granted, he wasn't too terrible in this show, but I never forgive his convoluted plot from Civil War. I'm sorry, I just won't. I hate this villain so much. And then the finale was kind of exciting, particularly with Sam fighting, has the new Captain America, and he's fighting, the plane or the helicopter or whatever, and he like calls up one of the passengers. It's like, I need you to take over. Like, that was a cool moment. I did like that, but then like again, the whole thing with John Walker is like they had this post-credit scene in the penultimate episode with him building the shield. And I remember I didn't even see that the first time I watched it. I just heard about it. Some people told me about it. And it amounted to nothing. Like, he built a new shield and it got destroyed like almost immediately. So what's the fucking point? It's like, look at this post-credit scene, and it doesn't really matter. So that was dumb. And yeah, it's trying to think. Oh yeah, they introduced Val, who was trying to remember her, Louise Dreyfus something, or whatever her name is, the actress who played Elaine on Seinfeld. And so originally Black Widow was supposed to come out before this, so we were supposed to be like, and they even like left a moment in the show for her to show up, and then everyone would be like, "Oh my God, it's her!" But Black Widow didn't come out till after this. So, in fact, when we saw her, it's like, oh, it's Elaine from Seinfeld. Is she gonna do that like stupid dance that everyone says is horrible? Anyway. So I wasn't very impressed by that thing either. A lot of these scenes I think were like kind of unnecessary and kind of filler. I feel like this might be an example of something that would have been better off as a movie. Like, there just was a lot of subplots and things that were unnecessary and just dragged. Even these last two episodes, I think, dragged. Yeah, and then the whole thing with the Flag Smashers, like how their motivation didn't really make any sense. Like, they had noble efforts, but they were just killing a bunch of people. And I don't know, they had a lot of scenes with Sam trying to talk her out of it, and she kept saying, like, no, blah, blah, and until she finally died. And then there's the big reveal that Sharon Carter was the broker. Dumbest reveal ever. I hope that they never follow up on that again. That was the post-credit scene of the final episode. Oh, she's back as an FBI agent. She's still the broker, it was the something broker, not the power broker. That's what it is. Yeah, that's very original. Anyway, the power broker. That was so stupid. I do hope that they never follow up on that ever again. But we'll see what they do with the Captain America Brave New World movie. That would be interesting. But anyway, I hope it's better than this. Because, that ending where he, gave that big speech on television to the senators and being like, you gotta do better. Here's the thing. In reality, in the show, that made the senators think, like, ooh, yes, you're right, we should do better. And everyone watching it's like, yeah, you should do better. And there's on pressure for them to, like, actually sort of help the refugees instead of just round them up like criminals. But here's the thing. In reality, all the, like, Fox News and all these websites and news outlets, Newsmax and all this stuff, their headline would be, Black man who stole Captain America's shield speaks out in support of terrorists. And I don't want to get too political, but let's just say I've been watching a lot of programming, a lot of news on what's going on in the world right now, where people sort of use the word terrorist to delegitimize legitimate concerns. And be like, oh, well, these legitimate concerns don't matter because there's also some people there who happen to be terrorists who also did some horrible things. Therefore, who gives a fuck about what's happening to them? I don't want to get too political, but you might know what I'm talking about. And so when Sam's like, don't call them terrorists, I'm thinking, that kind of reminds me of, I don't know, people would be up in arms, like, are you fucking kidding? They just kidnapped all these senators and tried to kill them. Of course they're terrorists. And they would label Sam as a terrorist sympathizer. And he would be demonized and say he stole Captain America's shield. He has no right to be Captain America. There would be, like, protests and everyone saying, not our Captain America. And maybe the movie will actually deal with this. I don't know. Deal with the backlash to having a black guy as Captain America, because America's still racist. And I do like how the show pointed this out, where Sam, was talking to Elijah and saying like, oh, the world's different now. It's much better. And Elijah's like, is it? Which he has a point. But I will say the ending where Sam took Elijah to his memorial at the Captain America, the museum, and he has his own little section, and it made him cry. Like, that was touching. I do want to know what that wall said. Did it mention, like, that he'd been wrongfully imprisoned by his own government? And maybe it said he died, because he still doesn't want people to know he's alive. But I wonder if it mentioned that part of it. Because I think that'd be something worth mentioning. But, that kind of takes away from the patriotism of the spirit of the exhibit. But I think it would be right to have the truth up there. But anyway, so, yeah, I mean, as I said, I found it somewhat interesting, and it wasn't quite as bad as I remember, but it's still so many things wrong with it. And some of it, of course, was due to the pandemic, and they couldn't apparently do what they originally wanted to do. And they say that's why the Flag Smashers can come off as a bit like wishy-washy, and their motivations aren't completely clear because some things were lost in the shuffle, which, I can buy that. But there was too many, trying to set too many things up, and I'm like, ooh, look, it's the next Falcon. Ooh, look, it's the Power Broker. Ooh, look, it's, Elijah. Apparently his grandson's going to be a character. Like, I don't know, I might talk about this later, but the MCU, the problem with the MCU now, and why a lot of people are having issues with it, is that they're setting up way too many characters. They need to simplify. But I'll get more into that later. Anyway, my rating for Captain America... No, sorry, it's not Captain America. It's the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, out of 10. I'm going to give it a 4. Poor. Yeah, it's not quite as bad as I remember, but I think it deserves a bit lower than a 5. I think there's there's some things that work, some characterizations that work, the acting was good and whatnot, but overall, it was just too confusing. Like, they didn't really decide how they, the audience is so confused about how they should feel about John Walker. I'm confused. I don't know what the show's trying to say about John Walker. The Flag Smashers motivation made 0 sense. Sam's side storyline was really boring and didn't really have anything to do with any. I mean, you could tie it in thematically, I suppose, but really it was so unnecessary, mostly just filler, and I don't need to see them hanging out by the boat having a barbecue. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? And there were some cool moments with Sam fighting the helicopter and whatnot, but it didn't even last that long. For the most part, it's just him trying to talk Carly out of it and her saying no and then dying. It's just and don't even get me started on the whole power broker bullshit. So, yeah, I'm going to give this a 4 poor. So, God, I think that might be the lowest rating I've given an MCU thing so far. I think so. Anyway, so now we move over to Loki Season 1. And this is where I'm going to break my own rule, because I just said earlier that I'm going to stick to my rule of only watching the final 2 episodes of each show. However, the thing is that I actually saw the finale just a month ago, because when I was watching Season 2 of Loki, I wanted a refresher, or I wanted to remind myself of what happened in the finale, and it was relevant for the Season 2 finale. So I'm glad I did. So I just watched it. So it's still very fresh in my mind. So I think it's kind of unfair to be forced to just watch the penultimate episode, which honestly I think is the weakest episode of Season 1, and then watch an episode I just watched. So I'm going to break my own rules, and I'm going to watch 3 episodes. So I think, as I'm watching 2 episodes, it's like a bit shorter than a full-length movie. So if I watch 3 episodes, it will be slightly longer than a full-length movie. So that's fine. And this is the only show I'm going to do it for. I might change my mind later. Who knows? But this is what I'm going to do. I kind of want to break my own rules when it comes to another show in part 2, Moon Knight, where I would rather watch the first 2 episodes than the last 2 episodes, but I don't know if I'll do that. I mean, I should stick to my rules, but in this case, I'm definitely going to bend the rules a bit and watch the episodes 4, 5, and 6, and not just 5 and 6. So that's like half the series. But anyway, the hell with it. I was tempted to watch the whole thing, but I'm like, no, I don't have time for that. I can't waste time watching all 6 episodes. But I'm gonna, it's just slightly longer than a full-length movie, so I'll be fine. So anyway, Loki, I remember when I first heard of the concept of Loki having his own TV show, I'm like, that's dumb. I have no interest in that. But then when I learned what it was about, that it was about like these time cops and guarding different realities and traveling through time and traveling through these different realities, I'm like, that sounds fucking awesome. And it was. And using the whole concept of the TVA being like, very like, they play very tongue-in-cheek. That's the term I'm looking for. Very tongue-in-cheek with the TVA. It's very reminiscent of like movies like Brazil and some other movies that kind of make fun of bureaucracies, and it's a satire on bureaucracies and how they're like portrayed as everything like mundane workers when they were really like controlling the entire time continuum. Like it's such a cool concept, and Owen Wilson, of course, is an amazing as Mobius in this. And yeah, I will say, I think I mentioned this already, but I will say I think Season 2 was better than Season 1. At least that is my memory. Maybe by watching these final 3 episodes, maybe I'll change my mind, but I doubt it. I just think, because as I said, like, the 5th episode I wasn't a huge fan of, and even the 3rd episode where they were on that planet was about to be destroyed, and Loki and Sylvie were kind of flirting. I like those were not so good. Whereas in Season 2, I loved every single episode except for maybe the one with when they went back to Chicago in the 1900s. That was a bit boring, but the early 1900s was it the late 1800s, something like that. Anyway, but other than that, yeah, I think Season 2 is superior. But that's just going from my memory again. But I still loved Season 1. I still remember really liking it and being blown away. Like, the music is amazing, and I remember the music being even better in Season 2, though. But again, and yeah, whatever, at the moment it's still up in the air what's going to happen with Jonathan Majors and the MCU, but which I would understand if they had to get rid of him. But I'm really really do not want them to get rid of Kang. Like, totally do not, and I'll be very pissed off if they do. Because Loki did such an amazing job of setting up this character, they can't just not go anywhere with it or just let it fizzle out. Like, that would be the most disappointing thing ever. But anyway, so yeah, since I still just recently watched season 2 and I've already watched the finale of season 1 recently, this show is really fresh in my mind. So I don't know if I'm really gonna change that much from what I'm saying here from watching the last 3 episodes, but we'll see. I'll go watch the 3 episodes and see if I like this just as much as I remember liking it, or perhaps even more. So, I'm back from watching the episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Loki Season 1. And I am actually very glad that I watched episode 4, because there's a lot of, that is the episode I remembered the least. And yeah, there was, like, I didn't even remember that the thing where Loki was put in a time loop with Lady Sif, like, constantly smacking him in the head. I thought that was in the early season, like episode 1 or 2. I didn't remember it was the later episode. And Mobius is being quite a dick to Loki. He had quite of a fast turnaround to all of a sudden being his friend again. But yeah, he thought that Loki was in cahoots with Sylvie, but then soon learned. And it's weird that nobody knew her name was Sylvie except for Loki. I kind of forgot that because I'm so used to everyone knowing her as Sylvie. But yeah, they didn't really meet her before this time. Oh, except for good old Renslayer. So yeah, the episode 5 when they were trapped in the void, I mean, that was kind of just as I remember. I didn't think it was a terrible episode, mind you, but it was definitely my least favorite of the season. Yeah, I mean, it was just silly, like the crocodile or alligator Loki and kid Loki, and then I really didn't like how all the advertising and pictures focused on that one, like, what do they call him, President Loki or something, who was just there for like 2 minutes and just disappeared. Like, I don't know. I thought that was kind of false advertising, and I felt gypped because he was all over the trailers and everything, and he barely appeared in it. But whatever. I mean, that's fine. It is weird that it seems like only Loki's managed to survive in this realm. They had a line in there, something about how Loki's a resourceful or something, but still, I don't know. I don't quite buy it. And so, yeah, and then the thing, we gotta eliminate Alioth, and Sylvie and Loki work together to enchant it or whatever. I mean, it was fine, but as I said, I think it's definitely my least favorite of the season. And then you get to the finale, which, as I said, I actually saw recently, so that was still fresh in my mind, fresh in my memory, but then I just had a bit more context this time because I watched the 2 previous episodes. And I am actually still struck, and I'm surprised. I've tried to find other YouTube channels that talked about this, but no one really talked about it. How it's obvious to me that season 2 went in a different direction than what they were setting up for. I think it's very clear that they're setting. In fact, they said it. Kang said it several times that when you kill me, all my different versions of me, you're gonna trade in for all these dictators. Like, all these different versions of me you're gonna take over. And I think, and they didn't really focus on that. They focused more on the fact that the loom was falling apart after he died. And I think that was a misdirection, or a different direction, not a misdirection, but a different direction than what they were planning for here. And I think here they were clearly setting up for a scenario where Loki and the TVA were going to have to contend with all of these different Kangs. And in fact, the ending where Loki returns to the TVA and there's a giant statue of Kang, I think was clearly setting up for this being that the timeline had changed. It's this alternate reality that now Kang is controlled. And I also had the impression that, Kang controlled this TVA, but there's going to be multiple different TVAs controlled by different Kangs, and they're all going to be at war with each other. That's what I thought. And I think they were setting up for maybe not exactly that, but something like that. Definitely it was meant to be an alternate reality because there is an inconsistency that's blatantly in there. When Loki goes there, Mobius is talking to Hunter B-15 or whatever she's called, and you sunk my battleship. and he's talking to her, and it's very clear that they're dealing with the issue, the same timeline splintering off issue that they're dealing with in the present day. That it solidifies it, it sets it in the present day. But then season 2 comes along and being like, oh no, this is just the past, and that's why there's a statue of Cain, because he used to be there and he wiped everyone's memory. That's totally not what they were setting up for. But since season 2 was so good, I'm willing to forgive it that. But I'm just struck by, and it doesn't make me wonder how the show would have went if they actually stuck to their original plan. I think they couldn't come up with a good enough idea for that plan, so that's why they retconned it. And they did, to be fair, like what they did was so good. I am willing to go with it, but I still notice that every time I watch the finale. And I'm sorry, I do think that the finale, I appreciate that they didn't have a Marvel-esque, someone with similar powers fighting the hero and they're like flying in the sky and throwing beams at each other. Like, I appreciate they didn't do that. But this is just exposition. The finale, not terrible, mind you. I still liked it. It was just mostly just exposition. It's just them sitting around talking and He Who Remains explaining everything to him. And I still have a hard time following, especially, I should say, after seeing the finale, some of his motivations and what he's saying. And again, some of what he says I think has been changed in season 2. Like, it seems season 2 was implying that when he said to see you soon, that he knew that Loki was going to travel back and experience that moment over and over again, which definitely is not what they were setting up for. What he meant by that is that a different version of him is going to come back because there's going to be 6,000 whatever versions of him, and he's still going to beat them all, and he's going to be right back in that place. But that doesn't seem to be what season 2 followed up on. So I think it was definitely different. It meant something different than what they were, what they actually did in season 2. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself with season 2. But yeah, it was mostly exposition. Don't get me wrong, it was still interesting, and I think the relationship between Loki and Sylvie was really good. And I think what they did with that in season 2 was amazing. Like, probably even better, but seeing how, it was interesting how Sylvie kissed Loki and just tossed him through the portal to get rid of him. And also season 2, by the way, I'm sort of stuck on what's changed from season 2. They had a clear point in the finale where there was a moment, like there was this loud noise, and He Who Remains was like, I no longer know what happened. He said, when I told you I knew everything that would happen, I kind of lied because I only know up to that point, and that point just happened, so I now have no idea. And that's why Sylvie was able to kill him. He made it clear that Sylvie wasn't able to kill him before because he could just move and dodge out of the way because he already knew everything was going to happen. But that timer, whatever that thing went off, saying that he no longer could dodge her and he no longer knew what was going to happen, so he didn't even know if Sylvie was going to kill him or not. And that's totally changed in season 2. Season 2, he freezes time after this point, which he shouldn't be able to do because he has no idea what would happen or whatever. And he's talking to Loki like he knows exactly what was going to happen, which is totally different. But anyway, I'm sorry, that's what I was thinking of when I was watching it. I was kind of fixated on what they changed in season 2. But watching the show again, hearing that music, God, I love the fucking music. The music is so good. The opening sequence with the different letters are going in different fonts is so good, and the whole concept of it is so crazy. And the whole bureaucracy, whatever. And I do like yeah, what they did with Renslayer, and yeah, seeing episode 4 when Hunter B-15, if that's her name, I can't remember, when she when she realizes that they're all variants and what's going on, seeing that transition and how Renslayer is trying to hide it and Mobius figures it out and she like prunes him for it, like that was brutal. And then when he comes back, he's like got the pruning stick and he's like, I'm gonna kick your ass, and she just easily kicks his ass and he's like, okay, you got me. So that was good. So I love Loki season 1. I think it was really good, really amazing. I love to revisit it. I just really, really strongly disagree with those who think a lot. I've heard a lot of people say they liked season 1 better, and I've heard some people say that they thought it failed to live up to season 1. I totally disagree. I think this is way better than season. No, maybe not way better, but definitely better. Maybe way better. Because that episode 5 was kind of forgettable, and I recall, I haven't watched it just now, but I recall episode 3 being kind of forgettable as well. Where I think every episode in season 6 was amazing. Or season 6, season 2. God damn it. And plus this season didn't have OB. I mean, come on. No OB definitely can be as good. So anyway, and that ending of season 2, oh my god, that blows the ending of season 1 completely out of the water. But anyway, my rating for Loki season 1 out of 10 is going to be a 9. Excellent. Still an amazing show. I absolutely love the music. I love the character of Loki. I think with the character stories they did with Loki and Sylvie, and then the fighting over, their disagreement on whether or not they should kill he who remains was pretty exciting. And the whole season was pretty good. Except for Alligator Loki. But 9 out of 10 for Loki. Really good show. So next, gonna go back. It seems like this is the lot in life for the MCU for Phase 4 and Phase 5 to go up and down. Great project, not so good project. Great project, not so good project. So next, we go over to Black Widow. And what I recall of Black Widow is, it's okay. I haven't seen it since the movie theater. Because I've had no inclination to it. In fact, I kind of not that interested to watch it now, but I'm gonna, don't worry. But I remember it being pretty average. Who's that guy, Dave Harper? Is that his name? Someone Harper from Stranger Things, who plays her father in the movie. Her father, if that wasn't clear. I don't know. He was a bit over the top, I guess. And I liked her sister. Like, she was good. And I hope to keep seeing her in the MCU and some of the banter they had in between. But I think the overall plot was just very average. And then what I do remember is how many times that Black Widow should have died. But she seemed to have superhero powers, even though she doesn't have superhero powers. That let her survive all these like falls that should have killed her instantly, or smashes, car accidents and shit. But anyway, okay, I guess I'll watch this movie. I think this is probably what's noted, the pattern you can recognize in Phase 4 is that the movies that focus more on ground level stuff, or in the shows that focus more on like ground level street fighting rather than the big mystical space or time travel shit, is less interesting. And we'll get to that again in Hawkeye. It's a lot lower quality than a lot of the more fantastical stuff, although Eternals is kind of an exception to that because that was fantastical and still not very good. But I don't know. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. I'll watch Black Widow, I'll find out, and I'll be back here to talk about it. So, back from watching Black Widow, and that wasn't so bad. It was actually kind of good. Kind of good. It was, yeah, underestimated how many times Natasha, Black Widow, there should have died. there was a scene where she fell from a balcony and like smashed like from the top of the building and like smashed into several levels and just landed on her feet and stood up and was perfectly fine. Like, does she have superpowers or does she not? Not to mention a time where she fell from the sky at the end of the film and smashed, falling like at terminal speed and smashed right into several glass windows, and it was perfectly okay. And the time that car hit her, and I don't know, it's, come on. I mean, I know like silly action movies like Fast and the Furious and stuff do this shit all the time, but and the superhero movies do it all the time, but they do it to superheroes with superpowers. who, if Thor gets smashed by shit, we say, well, he's a god. If the Hulk does, he's like this big hulking thing. Like, Natasha's just a person. I'm sorry. So anyway, but other than that, decent movie. David Harbour. Did I say David Harbour? That's his name, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, who played the Red... I think the whole thing about Red Guardian... See, here's the thing. This is the thing about the MCU, especially in Phase 4 and 5. They make reference... They're running out of the A-listers, and they're making all these references that only comic book readers catch. Like, I'd never heard of the Red Guardian. I'd never heard of Val. I've never heard of the Taskmaster, and I don't know, I've never heard of any of this shit. I don't read comics. I mean, I've heard of Iron Man. I knew all about Iron Man and Black Widow and Black Panther and well, I didn't know about the Guardians of the Galaxy. Nobody did. But still, that was the only exception of but now they're like dropping all these hints and being like, ooh, it's this person, and I'll talk about that more, and as we go through the Phase 4. But anyway, I don't know who that person is, nor do I care. And so all the references to Red Guardian, I thought they seemed to come out of nowhere because they didn't mention anything about him being the Red Guardian at the start of the film. He was just a Russian spy, and all of a sudden I don't know, his character was a little bit silly, and they was doing it for comedic purposes, obviously. Sometimes it was kind of funny, to be fair, but other times it was just annoying. So that was kind of hit and miss. I liked Elena, as I said, and I liked the sort of buddy cop relationship she had with Natasha. I think that actually worked, and again, like they just buried a bunch of killed a bunch of people at the prison in a landslide and didn't seem to care. But anyway, I mean, it was a cool scene. The scene at the end of being completely and utterly like defying physics and every sort of rule of reality was still interesting. It was still fun, I guess. And as for the Taskmaster, like, a lot of people were disappointed because apparently there was nothing like the comic book character. Apparently the comic book character was kind of like Deadpool and having like a sense of humor and a personality, and so they're comparing this to what Wolverine, what was it called? X-Men Origins Wolverine did to Deadpool by taking someone who's charismatic and a lot of personality and turning him into this evil, faceless bad guy. But as I said, I never heard of the Taskmaster, so I don't care. But I will say I don't think the Taskmaster delivered on as advertised, because the thing about the Taskmasters, they said that they're supposed to be able to imitate perfectly, like all the Avengers. Even showed her watching all these footage of the Avengers at the start of the film, and you could see she had like this shield, and at one point she like shot arrows like Hawkeye, but that was it. And then she copied Black Widow's moves, her fancy moves, but that was it. Like, other than that, it's like I was waiting for her to turn green or use Thor's hammer or something. I don't know. She was kind of, or you use the Iron Man suit. Like, she just fought a little bit like Black Widow and Hawkeye, and used the bow and arrow at one stage, and used the shield at one stage, and it's just like, so what? I wasn't very impressed with that. And it got a little bit silly, a little bit comic booky with, the evil guy controlling everyone, like all the women in the world, and have agents everywhere can control the world, blah, blah. They got to raise the stakes super high for all these damn superhero movies, which I thought was unnecessary. We just kept it personal, like some of the personal elements, such as Natasha dealing with the guilt of having killed the dude's daughter and found out that the dude didn't even die, and then the daughter didn't even die, but she disfigured her and ruined her life, and so that kind of emotional stuff worked, and some of the emotional stuff with the family kind of worked. How the Elena grew up, was really young, and it sort of damaged her, and she kind of looked at that family as her real family, even though it wasn't her real family, and so some of that stuff was emotional, like some of that stuff was good, and for the most part I was engaged. It was, suspenseful and interesting enough to keep me interested. I still don't get, like, maybe I don't remember, but I don't get what happened with what's his face, the Thunderbolt Ross, at the end of the film, when Black Widow surrendered to him, and 2 weeks later she's fine. It showed that she had that tape or that disc of the what's his face's plans. Is that it? Did she trade that for her freedom? I don't know. Like, I was a bit confused, and I don't remember where she was at the start of Infinity War. I guess that's my fault. I don't remember how that began. I know she had blonde hair, so I had to make it so she dyed her hair. Yeah, whatever. And I had that guy, the merchant guy who got all the planes and stuff for her. He seemed to come out of nowhere, and he'll appear again in the MCU. But anyway, here's the ultimate line, though, is that this movie should have came out when it's taking place. It was taking place in the middle of Phase 3 after Civil War. It would have been way more interesting if it came out then. And there was political, reasons of why they didn't do that. Because Marvel didn't believe in female-led superhero movies until Wonder Woman did good at the box office, and so now they released it too little too late after they killed off Black Widow's character. Like, I don't know, that was a bit annoying to me that they did that. I think maybe I would have liked this movie better if it actually came out when it was supposed to, and not like being a flashback movie. That's a bit annoying. So, I will say my rating for Black Widow out of 10 is going to be a 6. Good. That's what I've given it, and I'm sticking by that. It's because it wasn't terrible. It was enjoyable. There were some things about it that worked, but too many knocks against this. Most importantly being the fact that, Black Widow should have died like 5 different times in this film. It's a bit ridiculous. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for Black Widow. So next, time, space, watching What If. Now, of course, I'm only going to watch the final 2 episodes, even though they're half hour long. As I said, I'm not going to cop out and watch 4, although I watched 3 for Loki, but that's different. I'm going to watch the final 2 episodes, so it will be, relatively short. And I remember these episodes being kind of rushed, if I recall. That's my memory of it. And about the rest of What If, which I'm not going to watch right now, so I'll just go by memory, it's hit or miss. It's like some episodes are good, some episodes are okay, some episodes not so good. I remember the Doctor Strange episode being one of the best. I would be tempted to watch that again. I kind of like the one with where evil Hank Pym killed all the Avengers. Like, that was pretty cool. And there were too many episodes where I was like, well, what if this person actually turned out to be that person? Like, what if this person actually had that person's superpowers and became that superhero? Like, what if Peggy Carter was Captain America? What if T'Challa was freaking Star-Lord? And too many of those. I'm like, can we just stop doing the what if this person was that person? Now, I will say, I love the concept. I think I like the concept of what if better than the execution. But I love the concept so much that actually leads me to like the show better. Because I love the comic book. When I was a kid, it was probably one of my favorite comic books because I just find the concept of like parallel universes and what if this happened and what if that happened, like absolutely fascinating. So the fact that they had a whole comic about it and now they're making a whole show about it, I am absolutely and totally here for. And apparently, I was just looking this up, there's going to be a season 3 has already been confirmed of What If. I am psyched about that. Definitely keep this show going. Now, yeah, the Thor episode was dumb. The Killmonger and Tony Stark one was okay. I fucking hated the zombie ones. I hope they don't make the whole show out of it. I'm not even. That's probably going to be the first Marvel MCU thing I refuse to watch if they make a zombie thing because I'm not into zombies, and that thing was just so cliche and dumb. As I said, Doctor Strange one was probably my favorite. And then the one with the Avengers being killed was cool, and T'Challa being Star-Lord was whatever, and Captain Carter? That one was okay. I want to see Captain Carter some more though. Like that was cool. I'll see her again in a different version of her in Multiverse where she's sliced in half, but maybe I'll see she'll pop up again some more in What If. Season 2. Oh, which by the way, because as I'm recording this, What If Season 2 has not been released, although I know by the time I release this video, What If Season 2 would have been released and it's finished. But so you watching it's probably seen it. I haven't, though, as I'm recording this. So who knows? I don't know if it will be any good. But anyway, I'm going to go watch the final 2 episodes of What If. I guess I've already just gave my opinion on most of the show, but I'll give my opinion on these 2-part finale, and maybe it will refresh my opinion on the show as a whole as well as I watch these final 2 episodes. So here I go to do that. Okay, returned. I have returned from the multiverse, from watching What If, last 2 episodes of Season 1, What If Ultron won, and What If the Watcher broke his oath. So, yeah, I really like these. I think they're better than I remember them being. It was really exciting, and I do like how they used Ultron because he's seen as kind of a nothing villain in the MCU because he only was in the one movie, which most people don't think was a particularly good movie. Not a bad one, but not a particularly good one. And I talked about, I've talked about Age of Ultron before, how the movie was trying to do too much and it got confused, bogged down in too many plot lines. But Ultron, to me, was easily the best thing about that movie. So seeing them do a What If Ultron, where Ultron was an even bigger badass, and that he was the ultimate villain, he was even worse than Thanos because he spanned the multiverse and he actually succeeded in killing everyone. That was really cool. And of course, Part 2 brought in all of the characters, one from each of the episodes we've seen and one from one of the episodes we have not seen, or at least, as I said, you've probably seen this because I'm releasing it after season 2 came out, but I still haven't seen it as of the recording of this video, and this came out, 2 years ago? Anyway, yeah, that is something that irritates me, that, because if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Gamora, she has this, Infinity Stone destroyer, and she was not seen in an episode because the episode was not in season 1 because they didn't finish it in time. They had to push it back to season 2. And so there's this character that we haven't seen who's in this finale. We will see her in season 2, but we've already saw her conclusion in this episode, so that's kind of a bummer, man. But yeah, it was interesting seeing all of the characters from each of the episodes brought together. And in many cases, they just kind of glossed through a cliffhanger that was left open from the previous episode, like the one with Killmonger. It was implied that God, what's her face? Gwyneth Paltrow's character was going to team up with God, why am I brain farting on all their names? Is it Shuri? Yeah, from Black Panther. They're going to team up and to overthrow him, and that started happening with the Watcher just came in and took it out. And with the T'Challa Star-Lord episode, there was Ego was about to kill Peter Quill. That was implied. That Ego was going to take over Peter Quill because, he didn't become Star-Lord, but then they had T'Challa fighting him off, but then, again, interrupted that, too. And then we see Peggy Carter doing the whole Captain America Winter Soldier storyline. That was at the start of that movie. So, you get the impression that she's about to do her version of Winter Soldier. But, the Watcher comes in and picks them all up and forms the Guardians of the Multiverse. Now, I will say about the first episode, I think that I like that better, the first part, than the second part. Because before I watched the episodes, I said that they felt rushed, but it was actually just the second part that felt rushed. The first part was actually really eerie, and it was like kind of the best sort of what if scenario. What if there was this apocalypse and Ultron won and everyone was killed. Like that's the classic what ifs, and we actually got to see Ultron kill Captain Marvel, which was pretty powerful. And then the interactions between Black Widow and Hawkeye right before Hawkeye died, that was really powerful. That was all really good stuff. But the interesting things I liked about that episode was in the Watcher was being when he had his commentary, it was different than the other episodes, because he was like, oh, the thing to defeat Ultron, it's right there, and Hawkeye kept giving up and not seeing it, and it was like, it's right there, that was cool. And then when Ultron first broke into the Watcher space and started attacking the Watcher, that was really powerful as well. Where the Watcher is like, what, he shouldn't be, he actually heard the Watcher talking. But in part 2, the Watcher kind of already figured everything out and sort of set all the pieces in place, so he knew exactly what was going to happen, so he put all the pieces in place so that he could defeat Ultron. So he's, again, using his omniscient powers, and it wasn't shown as vulnerable as he was in the first part, which is why I found the first part more interesting than the second part. But it was still fun to see all the pieces fall into place. And the biggest question is, why would he bring Killmonger on the team when it was obvious that Killmonger would betray them? But that was actually the point. He knew that the fact that Killmonger would betray them is exactly why he chose them, because they needed someone to betray them and try to take the Infinity Stones, and so they could be in this battle of wits with Zora, and then Strange Supreme would realize this was the plan all along, was because the Infinity Stones couldn't be destroyed, but they could be frozen forever in time. The point was to get them away from the armor. Which is what Zora and Killmonger together accomplished. And so, the Watcher was the chess master. He saw, 10 moves ahead and put everything perfectly in place. Although I'm still not sure what we needed Party Thor for other than comic relief. I don't know why the Watcher needs comic relief. I guess he's watching all these stories. They have to be entertaining to him too, I suppose. Yeah, the Party Thor thing was a bit too obvious with the comic relief. But I will say that the episode did feel rushed. I feel like that should have been like an hour-long episode or even longer. Or they just do 2 parts or 3 parts. And because it happened like the Guardians of the Multiverse, like getting together and all of a sudden being friends. That happened way too fast. There was just like the Watcher going around being, I choose, you are chosen, and all of a sudden they're a team, and all of a sudden they're bantering, and all of a sudden they're acting like they know each other, and all of a sudden, Ultron shows up and they get into a couple fights and then it's over. It happened a bit too fast. I don't really buy the Guardians of the Multiverse as a team. They weren't a very well established team because it just all happened too fast. And like the Gamora character, who I haven't seen, well, this version of Gamora, I haven't seen her yet. She barely appeared in it, so I don't feel like I know her yet either. So, and also him going through the different universes and interrupting the storylines and being like, you've been chosen, and you've been chosen. But I like how they referenced all the episodes, because the 2 episodes that they didn't take people from was the zombie one, but then they had the scene where Doctor Strange Supreme took all the zombies and dumped them on Ultron, and then you had the Wanda zombie face off against Ultron. Like, that was cool. And then the other episode was the one where Hank Pym killed all the Avengers, and because that episode ended with the new Avengers, the ones that Hank Pym didn't kill, namely Captain America, Captain Marvel, and someone else, I can't remember. Was it Hulk? No, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't Hulk. I don't know, but anyway, they formed a new Avengers, and they were taking on Loki, who was trying to take over the Earth, and then the Watcher puts Black Widow, the one who's everyone in her universe was dead, takes her to that universe so she can help out there. Isn't that again, it was really nice, it was cool, but it's not, again, the Watcher interfering. But again, I guess that's kind of the point, because the name of the episode was, what if the Watcher broke his oath? And, he needed to break his oath, though, to stop Ultron, because Ultron would have destroyed the multiverse otherwise. And so it shows that even though he has, took an oath not to interfere, he knows. It's kind of like the Prime Directive. I've been talking about Star Trek a lot and the Prime Directive, and how the captains know when it's time to defy the Prime Directive. Most of the time it should be upheld, and it exists for a reason, but it shouldn't be a absolute rule that is never broken, because there are some times where it should be broken, and I think this is the same deal with the Watcher's Oath. So ultimately I thought this was cool. I thought those final 2 episodes were cool, and looking back on all the other episodes of What If, as I said, there was a lot of hit and miss, but overall I love the concept of What If so much that I'm willing to just love it. Even the episodes that don't work, I'm willing to overlook them or hand wave them away, and the ones that were just okay, I'm willing to elevate them, because I love the concept of the multiverse, and I love how it's executed. I love God, what's his face? Jeffrey Wright, who does the voice of the Watcher. He's so good. And and then having, of course, this is the last time we get Chadwick Boseman in the MCU, because he sadly passed away after doing the voices for this, and this was released after his passing, so it's kind of bittersweet for those watching it, and and everyone else who lent their voices, and even the people, the voice actors who were doing characters that, because not all of the actors returned, like they didn't get Robert Downey Jr. or Scarlett Johansson back, but I don't know, I talked about the Lake Bell, I think her name was, who did Black Widow, and not really sounding. She doesn't need to sound like Scarlett Johansson, doesn't need to mimic her or to ape her, but she needs to fit with Black Widow, and I don't think she did. But the dude, I think it was the dude from The Walking Dead, who did Ultron, was amazing. Like, I could barely tell that it was a different actor. He did such a good job as Ultron. So yeah, ultimately, this whole show works for me. So my rating for What If Season 1 out of 10 is going to be a 9. Excellent. And yeah, that's maybe being too generous for this, that had episodes, some that worked, some that didn't. But yeah, that 2-part finale convinced me to keep it up to a 9 and not an 8. Because I know there were other good episodes in this too, like the Doctor Strange one was probably my favorite, and the one with the Avengers and whatnot. And the Peggy Carter one was okay too, and yeah, so I want to give this a 9 out of 10. I think that the finale, even though it was a little bit rushed, it was still great. It was still like so awesome to see, and like the good outweighed the bad by far. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for What If Season 1. So now, next is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Now, I remember, I'm not eager to rewatch this movie, but I remember liking it well enough. I think it was averagely good, if I recall correctly, maybe a little bit too long, but I think the characters came off really strong, and the interactions between the two mains, Shang-Chi and who is it? God, I'm trying to remember his sidekick, the comedian. God, blanking on her name. I had to look everything up. Anyway, yeah, I remember their chemistry working very well, and I think it got a bit too Marvel-y at the end, all like all these movies tend to do with over-the-top, like dragon fight scenes. But I think the character stories are what really held this through to the end. I think, yeah, maybe it dragged on for a bit too long, but hey, I'll see how I feel. Maybe I'll feel differently on this rewatch. But I do know the thing with the Mandarin, I was worried. I think I even talked about this when I did my MCU Phase 2 or Phase 3 rewatch. Because I was worried, because I actually love the Mandarin twist and Iron Man 3. I strongly disagree with all the Marvel fans, all the comic book fans. Oh, this is so disappointing. The Mandarin's supposed to be this awesome villain. I thought it was great what they did by flipping those Middle Eastern terrorist stereotypes on his head. I thought it was amazing, and I was worried when I heard that they were going to show the real Mandarin in this movie, that they would undo that. And it doesn't. It doesn't at all. That great Iron Man 3 twist still stands. It doesn't take it back and doesn't lessen it, which is what I was worried it would do. In fact, we see what's his face, Ben Kingsley return as Trevor Slattery. And the fact, I was worried that it would reveal that he's really the Mandarin and was just lying that he's an actor. So that's what I was worried about. But it's not the case. He is just a dumb actor. And I like that they brought him back, and that the real Mandarin was actually just some other guy. I'm fine with that. That doesn't ruin Iron Man 3 for me at all. That's fine. Perfectly fine. But yeah, Awkwafina was her name. The name I was struggling to think of and couldn't think of, who plays the sidekick. And again, she learns how to shoot bows and arrows at the end of the movie, which is a bit silly, but the plot required it. Whatever. So anyway, I want to go watch Shang-Chi and be back for my feelings on this film. Okay, just got back from watching Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It's interesting. The thing I find most interesting about that movie is that the actor who plays Shang-Chi was in The Expanse. He's the dude. He was in one episode of The Expanse. He's the dude who was a Martian Marine who was with Bobby Draper and who went to the ring station in season 3 to retrieve Holden. And he's the leader of the group who got ripped apart by the protomolecule. Like, they ripped him apart. And I was like, that's him? Like, it isn't. And apparently he was in some, he's a Canadian, so that explains why he was in The Expanse. And apparently he was in some Canadian sitcom that I never heard of, or some comedy show. And so yeah, he wasn't like a big actor, and they made him the star of a big budget MCU movie, so it's a good break for him. You know, while I was watching this, I was noting how much the movie was trying to appeal to Chinese audiences, and I thought, that's a very good thing. And I was wondering how this movie was received in China, and so I went online, looked it up, and apparently it was banned from China, which usually a lot of the MCU movies do play in China. That's one of the huge markets, and they're quite popular over there. But this one wasn't allowed. Like, wow, really? Like, out of all the MCU movies to be banned, the one that actually tries to, appeal to Chinese culture is the one that's banned. But apparently, the lead actor who plays Shang-Chi said something that the Chinese government didn't like. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was like praising, whatever it was, that country they took over. If anyone ever defends it, then they ban them from China. Tibet, that's right. He might have said something good about Tibet, and so because of that, they banned the whole movie. Now, also there was some who say that it was kind of the Americanized version of Chinese culture, which is probably fair. That's probably a better reason to ban it than, just the actor saying something the government didn't like. But yeah, that's China for you, apparently. That's why MCU tends to avoid any gay representation or anything like that, because they don't want it banned in China. Although there was a couple movies that did, so maybe those movies are banned. Maybe they stopped caring. Maybe it's just getting banned from China all the time now. That would be a good thing, but then again, MCU is owned by Disney, that all they care about is money. So China is a big market, and they make a lot of money there. But I heard that it started going down, but it started going down here too, so it's going down everywhere. Anyway, Shang-Chi, good movie. Probably better than I remember it being. It was exciting. It had all those fight scenes that did get a bit ridiculous from time to time, particularly the one where they were on the edge of the building and the scaffolding or whatever. Like, they all should have died. But, it's a Marvel movie. You learn to take some suspension of disbelief. And yes, the bus scene was a bit over the top too, but it was cool. Like, it was exciting stuff. The relationship between Shang-Chi and his father and his sister, particularly his father, was played very, very well. Michelle Yeoh is always awesome, even though she appears to be in everything. So it's good that she popped up. The ending fight scene did get a bit over the top ridiculous when the dragon showed up and then that evil beast came through. It was a bit like lights flying out of people's hands and stuff, and that's when they kind of gloss over. But it wasn't too bad. Like, I would still take it over, say, finale of WandaVision and stuff like that. And I really liked Awkwafina in the movie. I think she was adequately funny, and I like the scenes where it started the movie where they were out drinking and they were like, oh, we should go home, we have an early shift, and they go out and like singing karaoke, and then they brought it back in the ending. I thought it was absolutely hilarious, probably the best ending ever. It was like the post-credits scene, I think, after they were talking to Captain Marvel and Iron Man, and God, what is his name? I don't want to get his name wrong. The dude from Doctor Strange. God, what is hold on, I gotta pause this because I don't want to get his name wrong. Wong, of course it's Wong. Yeah, so when Wong was like, "Hey, you guys better, go get some rest. We have to, try to save the world. We have a lot of work ahead of me." And it's just so funny how Shang-Chi just turns to Katie, that's Awkwafina's character, and just goes, "Or," and the next thing you know, Wong and them are out drinking and singing karaoke. Like, that was just awesome. That was just hilarious. That was the perfect way to end. And plus, like, when Katie and Shang-Chi or Sean were like having drinks with their friends and telling them the story about how they defeated the demon with the dragon, they're like, "What?" And to be fair, like at the start of the movie, the friends brought up the fact that half the world's population can disappear in an instant, so they're used to weird shit happening in the MCU. Let's be fair, but then again, they're their friends who would just work at it as valets, so I take it for her not believing them, but it's not as far-fetched living when they're living in the world of the MCU. Anyway, Trevor Slattery, as I said, love him. Thought he was hilarious. Thought he was a nice introduction. How he had his friend. God, now I'm so bad with names, but I'm just losing everything. That little animal thingy. What did he call it? God, I can't remember what his name was. But anyway, it was so funny, their interactions and how he was like, "Oh, I'm a thespian, mate." Like, I just love that guy. So yeah, it could be a little bit over the top, but overall I thought it was good character stories and pretty good action and good comic relief. So, good formula for a good MCU movie. So my rating for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings out of 10 rings is going to be an 8. Extremely good. I think it's a low 8 to be sure, because I think I'm being really generous. Throughout watching most of the film, I thought I was going to give it a 7, but then I was like, then I remembered I gave it an 8 before, and I'm like, do I really need to take it down? Like, is it worse than I remember? And it's not really. And I think it is deserving of an 8. Just barely. Like, it barely slides by, because I had to think about it a lot. I'm like, does this really deserve an 8? It's not a strong 8, for sure. But yeah, it's a weak 8, but it just makes it as an 8 for me. Anyway, so next I shall be watching Eternals. And this is one in contrast to Shang-Chi. This is one I am not looking forward to watching. I don't really want to watch it. But, watching everything in Phase 4. And you know what? I don't think that this is the worst movie ever made. When it first came out, a lot of people were saying it's the worst movie in the MCU. Worse than Thor Dark World. And I thought that was a bit hyperbolic. Now, since then, there's some movies that came out in Phase 5 that people had also said is the worst movie of the MCU, like Ant-Man or The Marvels. But I actually liked both those movies. I think both those movies are way better than Eternals or Thor, or all this other stuff. I don't think they're nearly as bad as people say they are. This one I don't think was as bad as people said it was, but I feel like the MCU, it shouldn't have done it. It shouldn't. A lot of people talk about how this should have been a Disney Plus show because there's too many characters to follow in the movie, which is definitely true. I did not feel attached to any of these characters at all because it was just too many characters to keep track of. And there was one who sat out most of the movie, and there was another one who just fucked off for the final act for no good reason. So I didn't care anything about the Eternals, and I thought that the plot twist was way too over the top. I think this is way too... It has implications, far-reaching implications for the MCU that I think are a little bit ridiculous, and that they should do without. You know, the whole thing with the celestial, like, birthing in the planet, and it was going to destroy Earth, and that's the whole point of Earth. Like, that's dumb, and I think we could have lived without that, and like, the movie itself is not terrible. It doesn't scream terrible. Like, I do think there are worse things in the MCU than this one. I think maybe Thor Dark World is worse. Maybe possibly even Love and Thunder. I'll see how I feel after watching that one again. Definitely Falcon and Winter Soldier is worse. But yeah, it's... I don't know. I just don't remember it being, even though it's not terrible, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just too over the top for me, and I never really connected with any of the characters. And honestly, I feel like they should not follow up on it again. They should just pretend it didn't exist and move past it, because people are getting Marvel fatigue, and if you keep putting out mediocre side projects like this that nobody cares about, then you're just going to increase that Marvel fatigue. So they should do less in the future, and this should be one of the projects that gets cut. Definitely, especially considering the reaction to this movie. But anyway, let's go ahead, watch it. I'll come back, see if I feel the same after watching it. So, got back from watching The Eternals, and one thing I have to say, one thing I kind of forgot about, is I think that the producers, or someone in casting, probably a producer, is fucking with us. I think they were like stoned one night and was like, you know, we have a character in this film, although we probably stoned, so we probably been like, hey man, we had like a character in the film whose name is Cersei. Wouldn't it be funny if because Cersei's got 2 love interests in the movie, wouldn't it be hilarious if we like hired 2 actors from Game of Thrones who played Starks and made them say, I love you, Cersei? Wouldn't that be funny? I think someone's fucking with us. Someone's trolling us. They got Robb Stark and Jon Snow to come on and repeatedly say, I love you, Cersei. This fucking weird. I'm sorry. Someone had to be messing with us. Someone had to be aware of that and did that on purpose. Like, the one Marvel property that they chose to hire 2 Game of Thrones veterans who both happen to play Starks was the one where their love interest was the woman named Cersei. Sassy. Anyway, sorry. That movie was not as bad as I remember. It was actually quite good. I will say I'm definitely more convinced after just watching it that it should have been a Disney Plus show. Definitely 100% should have been a Disney Plus show. I think it would have been a really good show, actually. It could have been a good show if it was Disney Plus. Now, that being said, the movie wasn't totally terrible. But as I sort of alluded to in my preamble, is that there were too many characters, and they didn't all get their play. Some like that. I even forgot all about that. The woman who runs very fast. I forgot all about that. She was either, I guess she's deaf or mute. I'm not sure. Yeah, I forgot all about that. I forgot all about that she had a disability, because she barely appears in the movie. And so she was barely developed. That one dude who, who was like created things with his hands, and he was like married to another dude and had a kid. Yeah, he barely appeared in the movie, and that God, I keep forgetting that comedian's name. But the dude who was in The Big Sick, he the Bollywood star, he barely, I mean, he somewhat appeared, but he wasn't very developed. The woman who runs fast wasn't developed. That one dude who controls people's minds wasn't really developed, and the Gilgamesh guy wasn't really developed, and the freaking Angelina Jolie's character, Athena, I think it's like Athena but take away the A, she wasn't really developed, and really the only people who were really developed were Cersei and Rob Stark, Icarus. It's not a factor, though. We'll say that. Icarus and Cersei, and I mean, Ajax wasn't even in the film that much. So they were Sprite. Did they spend some time on Sprite, I suppose? But yeah, it's mainly them. Like the rest of the people's like. I suppose you got a little bit more of the Bollywood actor dude, and his sidekick was very good comic relief. It was actually kind of funny at times, but I mean, he served his purpose, but he wasn't really developed. But characters like the and I guess Gilgamesh kind of served his purpose too, and so did Angelina Jolie. But yeah, characters like the woman who runs fast and the guy who controls people's minds and the dude who creates stuff with his hands, like they were not developed at all. Like they were just cardboard cutouts. And well, I guess the one dude who controls things with his hands, well, at least we saw he had a son, and he kind of had a personality when he appeared on screen. He just didn't appear on screen very much. I mean, point is, this should have been a Disney Plus show. Like, if they had time to, like, do an episode for, like, each character or focus on the character and develop their backstory, it all felt like there was way too much jammed into one movie. Now, you could say, I guess the argument is probably, I would imagine the argument that whoever was pitching this movie made is that, well, you can't say that a new group of Marvel heroes that no one's ever heard of before wouldn't work because Guardians of the Galaxy. But the thing is, with Guardians of the Galaxy, there was only 4 of them in the first movie that they focused on, and so they were able to focus on them in one movie. Whereas here, there's how many of them? 8 or something? And there's just not enough time to focus on all of them in one movie. And plus, like, and this movie's also also Guardians of the Galaxy, you're showing how they came together for the very first time. That's what we're seeing on screen. Whereas in this film, they have been together for literally, like, thousands of years, and so they had to do flashbacks to explain their origins, and then intermix that with present day, and it's just too much. It is way too much to try to cram into one 2.5 hour movie. So it just seems like a very elongated movie. Whereas, and you still don't get all the information because they're trying to do too much. Whereas, had this been a TV show, it would have been better. If the 8-episode, 10-episode show, it would have had time to develop all these characters, and so it wouldn't seem like cardboard cutouts, and so it wouldn't be like towards the end of the movie when they're like, oh, that person's going to die. I guess, because I don't really know who they are. Whereas if it was a show, I would probably could have felt more connection to them. And it's funny because this is something I think MCU Phase 4 and perhaps 5 as well have gotten wrong, and I heard other people complain about, is that a lot of the shows should have been movies. Like Secret Invasion should have been a movie. Winter Soldier should have been a movie, as I mentioned. I think there was another example that should have been a movie. And then this is an example of a movie that should have been a show. Like, they just can't seem to get it right. A lot of people are sort of happy with hearing that Armor Wars was originally supposed to be a show, but they changed it to a movie. So people were happy with that. Oh, it's probably better as a movie. I don't know if that's even going to happen. anymore. But anyway, so yeah, the movie was better than I thought it would be. I think it was interesting. As I said, it's just the problem is they were cramming too much into a short amount of time. The characters do come off. It is entertaining. It is, they have a lot of humor in it that really works. Some of the chemistry between the characters really works. I think the actress from that show Humans I used to really like, who is the main character who plays Cersei, she's really good. So is Rob Stark. But the whole thing, Icarus, sorry. The whole thing with Icarus betraying them and being the one who killed Ajax, again, it probably would have had more of an impact if I knew who Ajax was and cared about her other than she's the leader. Maybe it would have affected me more. But it just seemed like a silly reveal. I don't know. But the main point, actually, is the deviants. The plot with the deviants seemed really unnecessary after a while. At first, it's presented as the big plot. Oh, the deviants are back. But then you find the big twist, which, to be fair, was a good twist, which is actually that the Celestials were using them and they're basically androids they created to keep the human population going and rising so it could reach a certain amount that would allow the Celestial to be born, and now this amount has been made. And now the Celestial is going to be born and just destroy the entire Earth. And how they're supposed to be okay with that. That was a good twist, but I don't know how I feel about it for the MCU. I think that this is too much for the MCU. It's all the stuff that's going on Earth with Thanos and all the other various cosmic shit that they're doing. They're gonna have to throw in the fact that Celestial is supposed to be born. It was an interesting moral dilemma. Don't get me wrong, that the Celestials are supposed to be the ones that create galaxies, create universes, and so by not allowing it to be born, there's thousands of potential galaxies that aren't going to be created. But I just think it's too much to shove into the crowded MCU. It just adds an extra dynamic that we don't need. Maybe if this was done as a separate, as it has its own thing. That is actually the ultimate thing I've determined while watching this film, that it doesn't really need to be in the MCU. And I think it kind of, they went out of their way to cram in references, like Jon Snow asking about Thanos. Why didn't you, asking the Cersei, god damn it, I still can't get over that. Jon Snow asking Cersei about the Thanos and why they didn't interfere with him, and her answer is very weak sauce, especially considering if what the Celestials want is the population to rise to a certain number. It seems like the Celestials would have ordered them to stop Thanos, because his whole job was to wipe out half of the fucking population. They would have had to have been there for, other couple of million years, or at least hundreds of thousands of years, to wait for the population to get back up to the levels they wanted it at. So they're just lucky that the Avengers undid everything and defeated Thanos. Also, they crammed in the reference with Ajax saying, the reason why she changed her mind about humanity is because seeing the Avengers come together to defeat Thanos. And again, that's kind of weak sauce. I think they're just... And then having them sitting around the dinner table and Icarus saying, who's going to be the leader of the Avengers next? Or someone said that, and Icarus is like, I could. And it's yeah, that's again, there's kind of cramming in these MCU references just to be look, it's definitely in the MCU. Trust us on this. But it doesn't feel like it. To be fair, Guardians of the Galaxy felt that way a little bit, but I think what they ultimately did with them justified that, and even so, it wasn't trying hard to try to cram itself into the MCU, and also it didn't completely change the entire dynamic, the whole way the storyline with the Celestial popping out of their surprise and blowing it up. That just changes everything like too much to a degree that I think is unnecessary and adds too much unnecessary complication to. And this is one of my ultimate complaints about the MCU as a whole, or at least Phase 4 as a whole. And a lot of people who complain about Phase 4, and if they want to get people interested in Marvel in the MCU again, who are vastly losing interest in Phase 5, what they need to do is cut back on all these divergent storylines that are going off in 1,000 different directions and focus it more. Focus it. And at the moment, I still don't know if they'll give it to King, and I fucking hope that they don't, but they might have to, which I would be very pissed off about because Loki did such a great job of setting this character up. But theoretically speaking, let's say they keep King, they need to focus on him. And most of the MCU projects need to be related to that and stop going off in all these totally different directions. Now, what they're doing with it, apparently they're doing a street level, sort of the mature version of the MCU with like Daredevil and Echo. I'm fine with that. That's kind of what like having the Netflix shows around used to be like, its own separate thing. That's fine. But the Eternals is the perfect example of going off in the wrong direction and making it too many complicated. I think even Shang-Chi is kind of pushing it a little, but if you tie him back in, he becomes an Avenger and fights against Thanos, that's fine. But even if you have the Eternals show up, and it's just too, like, they set up a whole like cliffhanger where the freaking Celestial took the existing Eternals away and said you will be judged, and the other Eternals who were on the ship are fucking Harry Styles showed up and said, hey, we're gonna help you rescue them. Here's the thing, I'm very torn on whether or not I want a follow-up to this movie, because we kind of need one, because they left it in a cliffhanger and would kind of suck if we never got resolution to the cliffhanger, I guess. But they shouldn't have ended on the cliffhanger, because now they fucking this movie bombed and nobody liked it, and so people don't really want to follow up for it, but now we kind of have to get one. As I said, if people want to fight the Marvel fatigue, they need to focus more and cut back on the amount of projects and stop going off in separate directions. And here's the problem, like, you have to wait like 4 or 5 years, like whenever there's a post-credit scene cliffhanger, you have to wait like 4 or 5 years for the follow-up, because there's all these other like movies and shows that had nothing to do with that post-credit scene, and so we have to wait like 4 years for a follow-up to it, and people just lose interest in that time. And also, like, they're having to scrape the bottom of the barrel for these like post-credit scene cameos that only like hardcore comic book fans get. Like, I don't know who the fuck Star Fox is. Isn't that Nintendo game where they had like this fox and you fly in the ship? Like, I don't know. I never heard of Thanos' brother, and I don't fucking care. Oh, it's Thanos' brother. I give not two shits in this stupid elf going beep 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 or whatever. That's supposed to be funny. I guess it's dumb. Did not draw my interest. Don't even get me started on the whole freaking Jon Snow. His character shouldn't have even been in the movie, and the fact that it's setting up for him like being the Black Knight or whatever and having something to do with Blade. I am not interested in Blade being in the MCU, because again, vampires in the MCU, too many things, like it's taking off in too many directions. I think that Blade should just be its own thing and have nothing to do with the MCU if they must do it. And I would say the same things about the Eternals. And maybe they can actually do the follow-up of the Eternals as a fucking Disney Plus show. And although now they should have really done the movie as a Disney Plus show, really, because at this stage they already, like, they killed off one of the characters, like Gilgamesh, like, died before they even met. Like, two of the characters met back up with two of the characters. Like, And that's the other thing, by the way, that was really annoying about the film is that the whole film was getting the band back together, and they don't even get the band back together until the third act of the movie. The movie's already 2/3 of the way done before they get the band back together, and one of the people dies before they actually manage to get the band back together. Although on the Ajax died before they start getting the band back together. It was part of the reason why they got the band back together, so she doesn't count. But the Gilgamesh dude, he died before they managed to even get the entire band. And then the freaking Bollywood star just fucks off for the final act for no good reason, just takes off. Why did they do that? I don't understand. Anyway, despite my complaints, I actually enjoyed the movie. As I said, I think the chemistry with the main characters worked. I mean, they just needed to cut back on some of these peripheral characters, but still, it was written well enough to keep me interested and to make it suspenseful. So my rating for Eternals out of 7 is a out of 10. Sorry, my rating, I gave away my rating. Out of 10 is a 7. Very good. Now I got my words out. Thank you. I'll give it a 7. It's a weak 7. Weak Sauce 7, but I think that's what I gave it before when it first came out, and I stand by that. I think it's a slightly better than a 6. I would definitely call this movie better than Black Widow. It was more interesting. I think they had the camaraderie between the characters worked more and kept me interested more than the Red Guardian bullshit or whatever that was, and I felt like it was a more cohesive story that worked. I just don't feel like it should be in the MCU is all. But as a movie on its own right, it was actually fairly decent. But that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, the Eternals or the Eternals. I hate it when there's movies or bands or stuff where it makes sense to have the word "the" in it. I always naturally, just the way I want to talk, the way I speak, I want to say "the Eternals." That seems to be more grammatically gratifying to say "the Eternals" and just Eternals. I don't know if people are up in arms. I had a friend who used to give me so much shit whenever I said "the Family Guy" because it's just Family Guy. But I'm sorry, it sounded better it's naturally speaking, the way I want to talk, it naturally made more sense for me to say "the Family Guy" than just Family Guy, because it's about one dude who is the Family Guy, the Family Guy. But anyway, and also the band Pixies. People used to give me shit if I said "the Pixies." Oh, goddamn. Oh, forbid. I say "the Pixies" instead of Pixies, even though, again, grammatically speaking, it makes more sense to fucking say "the Pixies" and not just Pixies. That's why I like Smashing Pumpkins, because they're interchangeable with the word "the." On some of the albums, it's Smashing Pumpkins. On other albums, it's "the Smashing Pumpkins. And I think when Billy Corgan was asked outright which he prefers, is it "the" or just, he made some joke about it because he doesn't give a fuck, because it doesn't matter. That is the correct attitude to take. It doesn't fucking matter if the word "the" is in the fucking title or not. It should be not make such a big a difference. I think those guys who make such a big deal out of saying Pixies, not the Pixies, are fucking douchebags. Sorry. It doesn't fucking matter, although then you have shit like Predator, where Predator and The Predator are two totally different movies, and that's another whole ball of wax, which is fucking stupid. I think Star Trek did that with the episodes. There's The Emissary and just Emissary. But anyway, now I'm going off on a totally irrelevant tangent. So let me go ahead and get into what will be my final movie, or entry, I should say, for MCU Phase 4 for this video, and that is Hawkeye. And as I said, I shall only be watching the last 2 episodes of Hawkeye, which, thank God, I'm very happy about. And I'll tell you right now, right up front, I am not going to watch the post-credit scene. I am purposely going to not watch the post-credit scene. This is easily the worst post-credit scene in the entire MCU, and I want nothing to do with it. And I can understand why people think that the Phase 4 is the worst phase, just because of that post-credit scene in Hawkeye. But Hawkeye, like, his character himself is actually decent. I like him. I think the plot around it having to do with the tracksuit mafia, like, even that thing is so, just the words tracksuit mafia is fucking stupid. And there's really goofy cartoon characters that I hate. And I like that they brought Wilson, was it Wilson? Yeah, Wilson, something like that. Wilson Fisk from Kingpin, from Daredevil. Love that they brought him, and they played by the same actor, which is amazing. I mean, I remember losing my shit. But they did make him a little bit cartoony in the finale, and they kind of implied that he died. Of course he didn't die. And that really annoyed me. And yeah, but I also really love Kate Bishop. She's definitely a character I really want to see more of. I'm looking forward to them finally doing a Young Avengers where she's in. That would be amazing. And I think that, yeah, and I love, God, what's her name? Haley Steinfeld, I think her name is. She's a really good actress. Seen her in a couple things before. Yeah, and she always does a really good job. I really like her, Kate Bishop. She's got this sort of, yeah, she's a really intriguing character who's written very well, and she's really why I like the show, and why I wanted to keep watching the show. Although some of the stuff going on with her mother and Lalo from Better Call Saul was a bit annoying, but yeah, Lalo's character in this show was a bit silly. They're trying to make him into an established comic book character that nobody heard of, apparently. But whatever, but it just got goofy, and I remember the finale again being another, typical MCU big bash of bashing, the big, and goofy. I remember it being kind of goofy as well, which I'm not really looking forward to, but I am glad I don't have to watch the whole show, even though I like Kate Bishop, as I said, but I don't know, the show as a whole, didn't hate it, but it was just like not something I would really want to watch again in its entirety. Anyway, I'm going to go watch those final 2 episodes, and then I'll be back to talk about Hawkeye. So back from watching Hawkeye, and I kind of forgot about the what they did with Elena in the penultimate episode, how it began with her flashback to what happened when she got snapped or dusted during the, what they call the blip is really the snap, the Thanos snap. And that was cool. Like, that, it was really good reliving that, and I think the way that this ties into Black Widow was actually really good, and maybe somewhat justifies its existence. But yeah, that was so that was cool. Seeing the Elena stuff, and how she came back after 5 years, and all of a sudden her sister was dead. How shocking that was for her. Although I don't think it would have been common knowledge, because I don't think when she asked the friend or whose house they were at, and it showed them continuing to get snap the Black Widows out of it and use that red dust or whatever, but that one person that they attacked apparently didn't need it. That was cool. And yes, when she came back from the snap to ask her what happened to her sister, and she couldn't have known that Natasha was dead at that stage, because this is when everyone came back was right at the end of Endgame. So it would have just happened. So I don't think that would have been common knowledge yet. But that's neither here nor there. I think it's just implying that she shortly found out. And then this scene with her confronting Kate Bishop at her house was amazing. Talking about, I don't know, she was a little bit over the top and silly about, oh, hi, have some macaroni and cheese or whatever. What places should I visit? And, and all that, and being nonchalant. And by the way, I'm going to kill Clinton Barton. But that was actually a really cool scene. I really liked it, and I really liked the stuff with Kate Bishop, as I said. She's definitely the highlight of the show for me. But I definitely liked the penultimate episode better than the finale. As I said, and as I remembered correctly, the finale was a bit over the top and silly. One thing I didn't quite remember was the fact that there were thousands and thousands of these tracksuit mafia guys that just came out of nowhere. I mean, before we only saw 6 of them, and all of a sudden there's 2,000 of them just coming out of nowhere. And Kate Bishop at one point even says, "Oh, there's only 1,000 of them." Where did all these fuckers come from? There's so many of them. That just seemed very cartoonish. And of course, I remember the scene where the Kate Bishop uses one of the Ant-Man arrows to shrink that van, and then the owl comes by and just flies away with the van with those 2 guys in it, and Clint is just oh, well, I guess that's that. And I remember the pitch meeting pointing out how horrific a death those guys had coming to them. The owls with their sharp tongues, and they're the size of mice. It's not going to be pretty what that owl's going to do to them, and they're just making fun light of the fact that these guys are going to have a horrific death. Everyone else is they're going out of their way not to kill them and be oh, let's shoot them with this arrow that blows smoke in their eyes or whatever. And the stuff with Fisk with the Kingpin was over the top in the finale with all of a sudden he's this super villain who can punch people. That was never what he was so I wasn't a huge fan of that. And the whole sequence with all the cops who were actually LARPers helping them and dressing up that seemed, I never got into these characters. They seemed out of nowhere, and it seemed just silly. And the whole thing, I think, cartoonish is, it was too comic booky, I would say. But it was to the point of being cartoonish, which I think was at odds. I think mostly with the tone of Hawkeye seemed to be not sure if it wanted to be a serious, gritty crime drama or just a comedic, cartoonish comic book romp. And I think those 2 tones were at odds with each other. Because you had the character of Echo, who was more of that serious, crime drama aspect of it. And you had Wilson Fisk, who was supposed to be the serious crime drama, but then he ended up being a cartoon character. And then there's that Lalo from Better Call Saul, where he's being a swordsman, and I'm told he was supposed to be, he's supposed to be some comic book character I've never heard of. And he was really dumb too. It seemed really pointless. And I don't know, the stuff with Kate's mother and the fact that she was involved in all this, and she was the one to put the hit out on Clint. I still didn't really get an idea of why exactly she did that. Maybe it's only because I watched the last 2 episodes. Maybe if I watched them all, it would have been more clear to me. But I still don't get it. And it was revealed in the penultimate episode. Oh my God, she's the one to put the hit out on Clint. Why did she do that? I'm still not clear on that. Anyway, so, and what I recall of the earlier episodes that I didn't just watch is that they dragged on for too long, and that, again, this probably should have been a movie rather than a show. And I think like if they don't feel confident enough to release it in the movie theaters and spend like billions of dollars on it, then do a Disney Plus special, a movie special on Disney Plus, like Werewolf by Night or something. But don't, like, I don't know. It just seemed unnecessary to do it as a TV show. But what I did like about it was, again, the relationship between Clint and Kate. I think the chemistry really worked, and it was really touching at the end when she went to his house for Christmas, and how she's off to be the new Hawkeye. And I like how they ended it with her saying all these ridiculous names of her, what your other superhero name's gonna be, and Clint keeps saying, no, that's terrible. And oh yeah, I gotta mention one of my favorite moments was when she told him how he inspired her as a kid. I remember they showed that in the first episode, her as a little kid seeing, Clint in the first Avengers movie fighting off those aliens, and saying that why exactly he inspired her is because that he was just a guy. He didn't have superpowers. He wasn't a god from space or a green monster or could shoot lasers from his hands or anything like that. Just a guy able to who's willing to do stuff like jump off buildings and risk his life to help people, and how that inspired her, that if he could do it, anyone could do it. And that was actually kind of touching, and that was cool, and that was inspiring, and so I like that aspect of it. Now I have to talk about Echo, because again, I think, well, actually no, by the time this, I don't know my schedule exactly. I do believe actually by the time this video goes live, that Echo would have like just came out, but as a recording of this, of course, I have not seen it. Let's see, when is it coming? No, it's coming out like the day after this goes live, but it was around the same time. But of course, I haven't seen it at this stage. And when I first heard they were doing an Echo spinoff, my thought was, that's the least thing I'm interested in. I thought this character was okay, but not really that interesting, especially not enough to justify her own show, especially seeing how silly it was. That, I don't know, the way they handled their storyline wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the best either. And then that one dude who was like her best friend, who was her interpreter, who ended up like betraying her and trying to kill her. I didn't quite buy that, and like they were supposed to be like, oh, it was supposed to be like this tragic, heartbreaking thing, but I don't think they quite earned it. So, under normal circumstances, I would not be looking forward to this show, and it would seem to me something that should have gotten the axe. But the fact that this is going to be the first like gritty adult show in the MCU, kind of like the Netflix shows. Seems like they could have just kept the Netflix shows and brought them into the MCU rather than doing this Echo thing. But the fact that this is going to be our introduction to this world, and it's kind of set up for Daredevil, which I'm still hoping will be good, that they did the reshoots to make it more gritty and be more like the Daredevil was on Netflix. Although apparently they're killing off Foggy in the opening scene. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true. It's probably, sorry for spoiling that for you. And that Karen is not going to be in it. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I would rather that they continue with the Netflix stuff. But, Born Again, they're trying to do an MCU thing. So, I don't know. But as long as they keep the spirit of what Netflix is doing, and to be honest, a lot of the Marvel Netflix shows start to get bad towards the end, start to get bogged down and boring in too many episodes, like they need to be condensed. Of course, it's Daredevil Born Again, it's supposed to be like 20 episodes, I think, so it's like, really? But anyway, I'm getting so off topic here. Point is, that the Echo, that show's basically a spinoff of Hawkeye, because that's the only, apparently she's a comic book character. I've never heard of her before, but, that's, she was introduced in this show, so they're spinning her off in that, and I don't think, if I didn't know any better, if it was just normal TV show without any comic book source material, and all we have to go on Echo is what we saw in this show, I would say she does not deserve her own spinoff. But again, it's only like a 5-episode thing that they're dropping all in one day, so, you know, people think that they don't have faith in that show. But anyway, I'm getting off topic talking about Echo. But it was, set up for in this show. And I wasn't that huge of a fan of her character, to be honest. I was more interested, definitely want to see more of Kate Bishop. She was definitely what really, really shined in the show. Elena was great, too. Although I will say the final confrontation with Elena and Clint, where Clint sort of convinced her that not to kill him because, of Natasha and how she sacrificed herself to save everyone. I don't know if I quite buy it. It seemed like she went from wanting to kill Clint and agreeing not to quite easily just because he knew that special whistle. I'm sorry, but it reminded me of the whole Martha thing from Batman v Superman. It did a little bit. Maybe not as bad, but I know this special whistle, so then I won't kill you. I don't know. That seemed a bit out there. But anyway, again, I kind of thought about this for a while, but my rating for Hawkeye out of 10, I'm going to give this a 7. I think it gets a 7. Very good. I was kind of going back and forth if it's a 6 or 7 again, but it's a week 7, another week 7. Just because of how much I think I like Kate Bishop and her character and the chemistry with Clint, and how much, how interesting he is, how great of an actor Haley Steinfeld was, elevates it to a 7 from a 6. But I can't give it any more than a 7 because of how silly it was with the tracksuit mafia. I'm sorry, that was stupid. And the Echo thing was okay, could have been done better. I like the Elena stuff, but again, there were aspects of it that were a bit silly. But I think that the tone of the show was confused of exactly what the tone they wanted to do, and of course, I think that it would have benefited from being a movie rather than a 6-episode show. So that is, as they say, that is it. That is it for this video. Those are the 7 pieces. I can't just say movies anymore because some are shows, but those are the 7 entries in the MCU that I'll cover for Phase 4. So that is the end of Part 1. A month from now, I'll be back to cover the other 7 entries in Phase 4. As I said, I'm leaving out Werewolf by Midnight and Guardians Holiday Special and what's the other one? The I Am Groot. Yeah, definitely leaving those out, whether you like it or not. Whether you're like, those are part of Phase 4, you should, if you consider Disney Plus shows part of Phase 4, you should consider those shows part of Phase 4. You can if you want, but I don't. I'm just not covering them, sorry. But anyway, so that's it. That is it for my coverage of Phase 4 Part 1. I pretty much, talked about how I thought of it. I still don't think it was quite as bad as people make it out to me, even though I was kind of harsh on Falcon and Winter Soldier, and Black Widow. Eternals and Hawkeye is very middling on, it's okay. But more favorably as Shang-Chi, I thought that really worked. Not even if it was my favorite. And What If, I give a boost for nostalgia and for the concept, elevating how good it is. And of course, WandaVision and Loki absolutely loved. So they were definitely the high parts of those first 7 entries to me. But we'll see how I feel. You can check back with me in a month to see how I feel about the next 7 entries in Phase 4. So do be sure to check that out. Be sure to check out my channel. In the meantime, as I cover many videos, mostly doing Star Trek, we'll be covering Season 3 of Star Trek Next Generation episode by episode, and many other videos on many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.